least have some, a start on the direction there that, we'll be able to take a look at that now.
Okay. Also, the community needs to improve its global and regional outreach and provide more resources to those global and regional areas. A lot of what we do is focused in North America and Europe, and we really need to focus a lot more on reaching out to other areas. There was also feedback that the DA should set higher standards for Drupal events, specifically non-DrupalCon events. People feel that some of the smaller events don't really live up to the standard that the Drupal name should have. Community matters should escalate to groups, not individuals. I think there are some incidents that have happened recently that were resolved by what seemed like individuals, and people thought that those should have been escalated more to a group and should not have culminated in being decided by an individual. We need better community onboarding and documentation. I think this also goes to the documenting governance. Like, people come into the Drupal community and there isn't really one place to go to find out sort of how does the mechanism of the people of Drupal, like how does this work? Who are the people? What is, here's the CWG, here's the DA, here's how everything works and how it all works together and who's who and what's what.
Both technical and people.
Yes.
Communal, right?
And we should engage with other communities to discover their governance best policies. There's a lot of other communities that are not so dissimilar to us out there, and they're surely working on the same thing. So it would behoove us to go and talk to them and see what they're doing and what works and what doesn't. So what has happened so far? So Dries has stepped down as the Drupal Association board chair, and we've hired Adam Goodman. Drupal Association has hired a community liaison, Rachel Lawson. The Drupal Association has created a new code of conduct for DrupalCon that is enforced by staff. Representatives of different groups in existing governance met at the DA board retreat before DrupalCon to discuss the challenges and opportunities. I believe that was on Sunday. Dries has developed and published an alpha release of principles and values for Drupal on Drupal.org, and he talked about that on Tuesday morning.
And he published a blog post, too.
Oh, and he published a blog post. I haven't seen that yet. Dries will be holding a governance roundtable on Thursday. I know several of us will be attending that. So, next steps. Does anyone else want to take this?
David, you want me to?
Here, let's switch.
Okay. All right. Oh. So we are really, the key messaging here is we are actually trying to figure out what the next steps are. I think we hopefully would like feedback to hear if we were successful in soliciting feedback from the community. I'd love to hear that as part of the discussion part of this, but the community at large really needs to review these values and principles that Dries did to help steer some of these next steps. We want to know about that or iterate on those, provide feedback directly on those. One of the key next steps that we've identified is we have to find a more streamlined and continuous routine way to get feedback from the community. This needs to keep going. And someone needs to listen and process that and make sure the community is heard. This is really, I think, the key part of what the next steps in the governance process is moving forward. And one example of a possible next step could be creating a dedicated community governance group to provide that, which still needs to be defined if that happens. I want to stress, though, that this is led by us, collectively. major work in progress, and I hope everyone in this room finds an opportunity to participate and help us all work through this. I think that's how these things become successful. Now's the fun part. We wanted to use the rest of the time to actually hold a retrospective, a true retrospective, where all of you get the chance to share thoughts and feedback that we are going to capture, and it could be on anything. If you would like, I would especially love to know if you felt that the Slack meetings that were held were good, any other feedback about other things that have occurred, governance related, anything that you would like to see happen, or anything at all. So the floor is yours. Here's a microphone. Please come up. Don't be shy. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Adam. So in terms of retrospective, like feedback on how this process has gone, I feel like a lot of the feedback that has been given during the governance process has been extraordinarily watered down. For example, we had 13 discussions in Slack. I would say a third to a half of the participants in there were people who were regularly involved in the diversity and inclusion work group. We had lots and lots and lots of discussions about how any governance and values should be centered around the importance of creating an inclusive space that is there for centering around making sure that Drupal has a strong diversity of people from marginalized groups. That was like at the heart of the discussion. When the report was written up, the words diversity and inclusion were literally not even used in a pretty long report of like what the points were in the discussion. It wasn't even mentioned. And that was extraordinarily frustrating to see that happen. And it's just been frustrating that, I mean, that's not, you said it's a recent thing, but it's like not six to nine, I mean, it was last summer that we had these discussions. And so it's felt like that happened, and then it got really quiet after that. And then there was another, more governance things. Like we gave a bunch of feedback, and it's just frustrating that there hasn't been more progress on those things that we've discussed. Finally there's a value statement from Dries, but again, like it has very little mention of diversity and inclusion, given the prominence of that in the discussion about things. And so, I don't know. I guess I'd like to see, there's certain things that are only going to happen at a certain pace. So this comes from the top down, and I guess I hope that Dries puts attention on this going forward, because it's hard for things to happen when there isn't another power base outside of that. So anyways, that's my thoughts so far.
So I want to completely agree with you. Even as someone who is on this volunteer team, I was kind of brought in to look at the principles document about 2 weeks before it was released. And I did notice that we do have a principle in there that says we treat everyone with dignity and respect. And within the description of that, there was something that was alluding to diversity and inclusion, and I was really frustrated, and I was like, this should be a little bit more explicit. And I tried to push for it, and I don't think that it quite happened, and I'm constantly told, like, this document has to address a lot of needs, and, some people want diversity, and some people are worried they're going to lose their job, and some people are worried that their businesses are doing Drupal, and so I feel like so many things were being attempted to do all at once in this one document, and maybe this wasn't one of the priorities, which is really, really sad and unfortunate. And I and you and other people in this room that agree with us should definitely push this alpha and say, this needs to be more explicit. And coming from me, like just one specific thing, like it says, we do not support intolerance of any kind. I would love for it to say, we do not support Islamophobia of any kind, in any format. Because that for me is like a word that then I can point to and say, someone did something to me specifically Islamophobic. It's in the governance, you can't do this here. you know? And for me, that's one thing that makes me feel safe here. And if that's not there and it's so lukewarm and watered down, like, how do I feel safe then? And that's something I'm going to push the alpha on. Unfortunately, we couldn't get it in the first, draft of it, but I'm glad that we're able to have this conversation and, sort of point it out. And I'm glad that it's now collaborative and it's not, someone working in a vacuum on this document anymore. So totally agree with you and feel like everyone in this room who agrees with us, collectively has to push for that to happen, because these volunteers can't make that happen on their own. And if each one of us says, hey, that says nothing about diversity and inclusion, I support that, I need that there, that'll be sort of like a bunch of voices getting pushed together, and then someone at the top will be like, oh, that is a priority for the community. Maybe it was on the last on our list or something, which it probably isn't, but it's possible it wasn't at the top. So.
Oh, do you mind if I go first?
Oh, go ahead.
And I just wanted to speak to what you said about, this took so long. Like, we were frustrated too. We've been constantly asking for updates and really not hearing anything back. And we didn't even know that Dries was just working on this alone in a vacuum. I think we had thought it was going to be a much more collaborative process since, we'd brought all of this to him, and we didn't know that he had just drafted it. Like Fatima said, a few people got invited to work on it, and we just found out, like, oh, there's going to be a values and principles statement. And, we went back and looked at all of the suggestions we had, and a lot of them really didn't make it in there. And that was pretty frustrating to us, in addition to the very long wait with no, we were just like, where did all this work go that we did? And it was kind of frustrating. So we're hoping that, going forward, that we can, like we said, we're hoping to have like a person who is dedicated to like being the, information, the person who gets information back and forth, as well as making this much more collaborative.
I wanted to say one small thing too. I did read your comment on the blog post from our findings. When we aggregated the takeaways, they were recorded at the end of each meeting procedurally, and we literally copied and pasted most of what content was there. I think that we did ask for feedback on Slack at the end if the takeaways were not representative of what the feedback we were hearing. We probably needed to be more explicit about that, because it is something that I think a lot of us we care about. So I think we made a mistake with that. But I hope we move forward with that as a priority.
Yeah, so a couple points. I mean, I think to that one about D&I not being explicitly represented in the takeaways, I think it's almost kind of a situation where D&I was sort of this theme that was woven throughout most of the conversation, but it rarely came up at its own distinct point. And yeah, I mean, just by the way we captured the feedback, that wasn't reflected.
That's not an excuse.
No, not at all. It's a.
If we could improve that, I would
yeah.
love to hear that.
This is something we can do better next time. Yeah.
Just say it was a mistake.
As far as the values go, I agree that that there's a lot of improvement that can be made. I think Dries I know that he did spend a lot of time working on these, and I he followed his own process, which is not necessarily the process that maybe was the one that was best for getting community feedback in this situation. But regardless, we are at the point now where, yes, we all need to be weighing in, providing feedback. There are open issues specifically regarding the language around diversity and inclusion, which I was looking at last night, and I agree is messy and unclear right now. I know personally, just speaking as a person, that Dries cares deeply about diversity and inclusion, that it is a priority for him, and I think where he struggled was with how to best articulate it. And but we can all help him with that, and we all need to. So the issues are open, and let's go in and provide him with as much help as we can.
Hi, Sally. I don't feel like he's very accessible to most of us to do that, and I know he's very busy, but like how, I mean, like we can tell George stuff and George relays it to Dries, but it was only like in that document he released with the principals where it was like something we could have, I don't know, a day and a half where we actually got to interact with him
Right,
directly.
so this is a significant problem because he's not accessible to us.
Yeah.
And we were the ones doing this.
Yeah.
Right.
We kept asking George for updates. George didn't even
I-
have updates.
We didn't know about the principals until the week we were invited to,
Right.
or only I was.
Yeah.
This is the number one thing that,
I mean, he's not
needs
even
to-
here, so I don't even know what we're going to achieve, like, with this.
So when I found out about the principal's document, I sent an email. Sorry. So when I found out about the principal's document, I sent an email and I was like CCing everyone who had done work on this, and I was like, we're about to go and have a community conversation about what we did, and we have no idea what you're working on, no idea what's happened. Can we get an update? And then all of a sudden we got an update with like, oh, there's like this invite-only thing on Sunday with the DA board, and then there's a thing on Thursday. It's a roundtable. We're also releasing the principal's document, and it was so late in the game that for me it was very frustrating because it was like, hey, I did work. I asked community members to give me feedback. I took valuable contributions and time from community members, and then I didn't follow up, and that makes me look like a terrible person. But it's not really my fault either because the person who's supposed to follow up with me didn't follow up. So there was like a total lack of communication across the board. I don't think that we've solved that yet, and I think it would be a good idea to get a solution for that in place so that this doesn't keep happening. Because as Adam said, like this should be a continuous process, and how do we keep it continuous, and how do we keep our leadership talking to us when they assign us to do this kind of work?
that is incredibly good feedback and is precisely where we are
Yeah.
right now. Thank you. Do you have more?
Well, I mean, frustrations are.
Please.
Yeah,
This is a safe space.
yeah, it's being recorded.
I can, do you want me to,
Would that make me feel more comfortable talking about it if we just stop recording?
it should be done, I think. I unplugged. Okay. I was told that the wire needed to be plugged into the machine for it to be recording.
slides, but we're done with the slides.
Okay.
Recording, do not touch.
We'll talk to them after. That's cool.
Do it.
Sometimes you do tough things.
Security team is on it.
You're taking the fall for this, right?
I can make a comment on if that's recorded or not. So I do take issue with just one thing that Fatima said, the idea of we're